round of applause for Mark. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Yes.
No, no sé por qué. Aquí mi cámara está prendida y a principio funcionando, pero
Ah, perfecto.
My camera is on. Can you hear me? Can you see my presentation from there? Okay. So, what was the host in Campina Grande, the South School of Internet Governance? Many people were at that meeting, and Pablo, together with Ana Clara, Percival, many other people participate in this forum. So we're going to do something more interactive. We are going to ask people to participate. I'm the moderator and will participate together with them. Professor Lucena will try to make it more dynamic. Pablo, can you hear me, Paul? Yes. Good afternoon to everybody that is attending the SSIG. I would have liked to be there. However, because of commitments in Brazil, I couldn't make it. So good afternoon to all of you. I couldn't had the chance to meet Olga and Adrian in that not so long ago they were in Campina Grande in Brazil. It's a pleasure to be here once again. Okay, the idea is that you participate in this dynamic session. We're going to talk about regional governance. It would be try not do not try to do it at home. With Mark, we're going to be as interactive as possible. We're going to be dealing with topics like know-how, knowledge related to technology. We're going to mention national regulations, and also for the people that are in your countries, we should see the connection between the regulatory framework of digital economy, personal data, the cross-border flows of data, and the challenge ahead of us that are becoming more relevant in our regions, and also the perspectives of some countries. And if we have room for questions and answers, basically we will address it together with the initiatives or the perspectives of every single country. Hmm. Are you aware of the initiatives of data governance in your own countries? So this is a survey. Click on the QR, and while you respond to this survey, let me tell you that I don't know if I had enough time to say it in Campina Grande because it's a simple organization here. But data protection or personal data protection sometimes is dealt as the end, as the end in terms of digital transformation. However, the starting point to face the data, the personal data perspective is exactly the opposite. Data protection is the way of entering digital transformation, especially the regulatory framework. In Brazil, is what we witness in Brazil. As a matter of fact, internet governance and a model of data governance as articulate specific actions serve to pursue the economic and the digital transformation that emerge in every single country. Is what we're gonna do with synthetics, augmented reality, artificial intelligence. So this is very, very important in the SSIG. To frame and to underscore the data, personal data protection is entering was the first step within the governance framework for a digital asset. What is the result of the survey? We see a couple of colleagues that are presenting this issue. Yes. We have a large number of respondents that are not involved. So it's interesting that we should discuss this. 33% respondents say no. So 33% are not aware of this topic. I don't know if you had some suggestions that we could make. From Brazil, we bring the perspective of a country that entered too late. There was a latecomer in this discussion in 2018. Before the pandemic, we provided more structure. In Brazil, at that time, I don't know if you remember a report published by Renato and Bruno before the pandemic, because we had 40 legal frameworks that spoke of personal data protection initiatives rather than having a law before having a law. So that's the way we saw it in professional or educational spheres, medical field, the legal aspect, the financial arena, with the different privacy mechanisms. But we didn't have a general, comprehensive regulatory framework as the one that was passed by the law of data, of personal data. We have the experience of Peru. Yes, I work with Maritza Agüero and Thomson Reuters in a couple of training courses in Peru, so my acknowledgments to them. Where we can trace many similarities across Latin Americas. What usually happens is our model is more similar to the European models. So the law passed in Peru is in line with the regulatory framework in Brazil, Argentina. And Argentina has a data protection law that dates back to many years, 2000, I think, right? Yeah, it was like the first one in Latin America. And since it's the first one, it has many reviews, many updates. But let me underscore another thing, Mark. As we said, in Brazil, we passed a regulatory framework that is comprehensive, that is being in effect lately. If we're speaking of Uruguay, Colombia, and Argentina, that has had a lot of experience with their personal data protection laws, we are having a look take closer look at jurisdictions that they have been involved in this for a long time. Even in Europe, I mean, I lived in Belgium and in Portugal, and I can clearly state that even though these countries focus on personal data from the point of view stronger regulatory frameworks on a daily basis, it was not protected by personal data until this digital transformation process came of age. I think it was the 70s or the 80s, the national conventions, but digitally did the I mean it didn't exacerbate the problems. The same that happened in Argentina and Uruguay, the ones that they have been with this model in in their own jurisdiction for some time. The importance of legal framework was not that much, and this is one of the reasons why jurisdictions that are lying behind are trying to get more up to speed. Even the older ones require amendments or reforms along these lines. Now, Mark, a diagnosis with details. Implementation of personal data regulatory frameworks in your own countries. I'm sure that there should be a slide more to the, or the slider will turn more to the left if it's experimental, or the slider will turn to the right if you're more advanced. 4 dimensions: rules, implementation, surveillance, sanctions, and visible transformation. Okay, let's start. What do you mean by surveillance and sanctions? If government participation is effective, yes. The idea to interact with the audience is the existence, whether you have rules or not in place. Second, how much effort was made to implement or to pass regulations, to disclose them, or to raise awareness. And third, the role of the regulatory entity, the state, or the self regulatory framework. And fourth, this is not really explained in legal regulatory frameworks. A country sometimes focuses on imposing rules, implementing them, surveilling, and imposing sanctions in order to create changes, practical changes in the digital life of people. Because while protecting data, you need to assimilate the ventures, platforms, and assimilate the idea of personal data, and this implies this visible change.
Ahí están las empresas.
To the extent that companies are concerned by default with the idea of personal data protection. So I would like to know what is the level of awareness. More than 40%, 30% basically said that there are rules. And it correlates with visible change and surveillance. Basically, they are run almost together. Yeah, they go hand in hand. Yeah, you have surveillance, more surveillance that I think this will change. The implementation is more or less at the same rate, 3.1, 3.2 for implementing the rules.
Esta es nuestra.
And then surveillance sanctions, and this allows me to have this idea. Probably these are evolved rules. The implementation raises awareness, but in surveillance and sanctions and the change that allows me not to see the experimental phase, but not that well developed.
Ahora, Mark, esta también me parece una.
It seems to me that this is important, Mark, because as the change is visible, there's clearly a link between the evolution of how mature this framework is. If personal data protection was driven in many jurisdictions, rightly so, as the fundamental rights of people, but it has to do with the development of the digital economy. And we have quite a dispersion. This needs to facilitate and bring more evidence that this is representative of a competitive advantage. I don't know if it's self-evident, but this dispersion is very relative because the phenomenon of e-commerce is a global phenomenon impacting all of us. But in the case of the digital economy, we have data that will require regulations in place or personal data laws. Probably it depends on a group of stakeholders. If we're speaking of people connected to internet governance with digital economy or platforms or with the government sectors, I am sure that in your governments there's more development or sectors of the government involved in digital transformation. And for these groups, I'm sure that there's a connection between digital economy and personal data protection. Probably in this case is more evident. But here there's more dispersion. And here for most of the people this perception is not clear.
Ni siquiera la.
We don't know if the, uh, the data protection. So, so I think is the majority is in this area. So they might be answering from their own country's point of view. We need to consider that. So we will follow with another colleague. The, okay, should we follow? Should we continue? We'll be here to help. So I'm going to make a special suggestion here. The dynamic is the same in your regions, countries, whatever your specific environment is. Or you might not even have started, to look at those things. But we're going to look at those frontiers or borders data, which is a very interesting topic. Does someone want to say something? It is very interesting because we have some specific agreements between countries which might not be from Mercosur. I'm not sure about the names. So there's this progressive Trans-Pacific Agreement, Chile, Mexico, and Peru. So they have these specific agreements with other countries. So that is why it's transfrontier, and that's why we might not have only Latin America. So we are used to bilateral agreements, Mercosur agreements, but these initiatives that include other countries might be even further and further away. What's your opinion on this? I would leave this topic in our last slide for now, almost as a challenge because we need to discuss this. And if we look at the economic frame, the digital economic framework, we might realize that it's cross-border in nature. We do have certain agreements of particular points, but we're talking about protecting them. But that might be an internal policy or external policy, and it's a wider topic that is being debating in different conferences, and last week's been debating quite deeply. So, in my opinion, there is a basic principle that needs to be considered when we have all these regulations internally, but also the cross-border ones. And we might have some ideas not so aligned in terms of how this pipeline has to continue. We do have a model that has been used, has a model, has a framework in this general agreement of the European Union. So when there isn't a rule or a standard clause in this agreement, we might not all agree on those topics. And so in Brazil, we started to analyze certain concepts. But so I would say this particular topic is a real challenge. So I will need your participation and engagement more directly now. So we have three very important challenges that are important to mention. But we will save them for later because what we need now is your participation and engagement. So this is the answer. This is the answer now. So what would you say is the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenge? There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, he's horizontal now. No, there we go. Okay, perfect. There we go. So fragmentation is a topic that is comprehensive and is being added now. So the possibility of fragmentation, although I say again, I mentioned it before, I have followed this process of reforms in the national regulatory framework in different countries in Europe, and I went through the changes of the executives. And then after that, I followed the process in Brazil, and I have also followed the same processes: Argentina, Uruguay, Korea. I was there too. And TS in South Korea. And we're still working in this project. So, this law in South Africa, and in all of these regulatory frameworks that I've been overlooking, we can see a common path. All all of this is almost like the structure of this regulatory framework is similar. The legal framework, data, um, sensitive information, sensitive data, we all agree on how we should deal with the cross-border data. But even in China, we do have these regulations, and they're not that far away from this general panorama that we observe. The concept is the same, the expression is almost the same. There might be interpretation differences because of the regulatory entities. However, the basics are the same. Um, so we do have colleagues that are debating this, and I don't really know a unique, only single protection authority that has been built or initially or chosen to conduct this process alone. And another challenge that I think is very important, or is continue to be important, I was in San Jose a long time ago, 10 years ago, and the technologic gap was huge, and is still being a very important challenge there. Can we talk about education in general? Um, so there's a perception that we move very quickly from education. For us, is normal because we are in this debate. But for the general public, is this is this an important topic, or is this something that they don't really consider, or it might be somehow abstract for them? Um, the population education might be a specific perspective in Argentina, and I think this is a topic that I was discussing exactly with some colleagues, which we call the multi-sectorial board. And this will have further and further discussions because you do have this multi-stakeholders model. I'm not sure if it's the same one for those who are getting into. They have this advantage, this value to receive and introduce um, new people to internet governance. You probably know a lot about the subject and about multi-stakeholders, models, but it's important and we need to continue to insist because now we are talking about external policies with cross-border data protection, economical issues, and the connection and the importance between the regulatory framework in terms of personal data and the strengthening of economic system that has the right conditions to become competitive at a global scale. But I don't think with this, I would like to highlight or mention that what is important is the multi-sectorial dialogue, because that is what is important, is essential for us to face the new challenges. Only with platforms, probably, I think it was here. So we might have this idea of paradise, science in harmony, but and with this, we might be getting to the end of my remarks. But we do need a model that is viable, possible from a national level, and that can achieve that the country has the norms and that can continue working with dialogue. That is very important. So in this matter and in this sense, we have the pleasure to be able to contribute with an institution in Brazil that regulates the functioning together with the protection data, and it was thought created in this agency. So it's multi-sectorial agency, and is facing many issues and many problems that could happen in anywhere in the world, but continues to hold this idea of a multi-stakeholder model and tries to advise the data protection system in Brazil. So we have public institutions, governments, civil society, academies, and other institutions. And that's why it's so important, because we have also the vision of the education sector. So from August last year, we have new points of view, and even the president has been included in the debates. But I still believe that it's very important that this multi-stakeholder model and vision is possible. It might not be the solution, but it is the pathway, it is the pipeline that we need to follow to achieve a consensus and, and for Brazil, so it can function and could deliver socially, but it also applies to other countries. It's a practice that could be implemented in any other country. Well, I think everyone would like to move on to a coffee break now. Um, and my dear friend, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. A round of applause.